Welcome, school leaders. I know many of you are busy with closing out your school year and preparing for summer, but we're so glad that you're able to join us today. I'm Amy Havard with E3 Alliance, and my colleague, Teri Clement, is here with me today. We're excited to share ideas and build some understanding around the concept of accelerated learning for all. The experience of leading schools over this past year has left us forever changed, and we know that opportunity gaps for students have widened, compelling us to reach for innovative, transformational practices to meet their needs. We'll be sending a follow-up after today's session with a link to the slides and a recording of this webinar for future reference. But Lori has also put a link to the slides in the chat if you want to follow along with us today. Of course, after you receive today's recording and slides, you also are welcome to share those with anybody else that you think would benefit from today's content. At E3 Alliance, we support schools and leaders in the work of transforming education systems through data and collaboration, so all students succeed. We've worked alongside school leaders for many years, including this last one, which was really a doozy. And we've developed a set of perspectives and strategies that will help us meet our mission. Accelerated learning for all is going to be a critical component of student success for the 21-22 school year. And this is why we're inspired to share these ideas with you today. Let's start with the why. Why are we invoking acceleration right now? Many lessons were learned while leading schools in the past 14 months as we navigated school closures and interruptions with big time adjustments to how we work with teachers and students and how we lead learning. We also continuously were being provided with new data reminding us of how far behind students have fallen, as well as the inequities that have been spotlighted and amplified. Some of you may be grappling with some of the end of year assessment data you're receiving, really trying to figure out how to respond strategically and support your students next year. When considering accelerated learning for all as part of your response, it's important to be on the same page about exactly what that means. First, it does not mean to go faster. So it's important that we don't mix it up with other words as we adapt these terms from science to the work of us as educators, like speed, which is your pacing. How much learning will happen over a period of time? And then velocity, which is the speed of learning in a particular content subset or category, i.e. the direction. This means that acceleration synergizes both of these ideas into one, with the notion that we adjust them according to the learning objectives and student needs. What actions or specific work is involved? It's narrowing the focus to only those most critical standards, and then finding opportunities to pre-teach vocabulary, background knowledge, skills, or anything else that students need before regular instruction occurs. Acceleration makes core instruction more accessible and therefore more likely to be effective for students, ensuring school leaders and teachers are working smarter, not harder, to help students recover from unfinished learning of the past year. As we deepen this understanding about accelerated learning for all, it helps to consider what kind of thinking we'll need to change or move away from. Leading instruction with an accelerated mindset means that you need to transform your thinking to look forward instead of backward. For example, use time that would previously have been spent on remediation to instead prepare students for new grade level instruction. Instead of reteaching standards that have been missed in the past, pre-teach to the standards that students need now for this grade level. Now that we're all on the same page about this concept of acceleration for all, let's look at the how. What is it that leaders need to do to make this happen? Since leaders can't be everywhere at all times, it's important to use systems thinking when leading change in a specific direction. These are some of the focus systems we're going to share ideas about with you today. But before we do that, I'd like you to share what you're thinking so far. Considering everything we just heard about accelerated learning for all, Which of these leadership topics might be the most significant barrier to implementing this at your school next year? We're going to do a quick poll to hear about what you're thinking so far. So Lori will share the poll, and everybody, if you'll take a moment to respond. Again, giving everyone just a moment or two longer to log in your responses to that poll. All right, Lori, if it looks like most people have responded, can you go ahead and share those responses with us? So as you can see, we are pretty divided on which of those barriers are most concerning to us right now. So lots of people equally concerned about how to manage the staffing and scheduling systems, or how to change that mindset or bring in that campus-wide commitment. But also a lot of you guys are thinking about what are the structures that will really support teachers collaborating around accelerated learning for all. And then how do we as leaders support and monitor those? The good news is we will definitely be talking taking a deeper look at and discussing each of these systems for leading accelerated for learning for all as we go throughout this webinar. So let's start with looking at how you build a team of professionals on your campus who will engage in the work for your students. To serve the mission and achieve the vision of your school for your students, you'll want to make sure that you have the highest quality professionals engaged and working within that system of shared beliefs. How to do that exactly begins with leadership decisions around your current instructional staff and how you organize them and their work. First, evaluate teacher assignments as they currently are to ensure optimal ratios, and then look for flexibility in teachers who could support acceleration periods through teaching, push-in, or partner assignments. Next, consider which teachers would thrive when asked to specialize in accelerated learning roles. These would be those who are strong in building relationships and they have demonstrated success in the past with struggling learners. Remember, to accelerate learning for all, for struggling and on-level learners, we must be willing to let go of that intervention remediation mindset. And we need to use our content knowledge to pre-teach and prepare students for success in on-grade level learning. That means these teachers who would really thrive in acceleration roles are those who, as we mentioned, build relationships, but also have a very strong content knowledge. Lastly, when it comes to recruiting new teachers, consider the needs to start building a culture of accelerated learning. Not only will you want to look for teachers who share beliefs that are in line with the mission and vision of your school, but are also enthusiastic about accelerated learning for all. One way to do this is to communicate with transparency your intent to lead with this mindset. If you do this from the start, you're more likely to build a staff who can engage successfully in this work. To support and organize the work, you'll want to think about when acceleration is possible on your campus. Look at your bell schedule from this year and find opportunities to build in accelerated learning throughout the day that's accessible to most or all of your students. This support may include tutoring or small group instruction and or regularly scheduled blocks of focused learning. It could really be whatever you find in your schedule. As leaders, this is where we really need to get creative to find these opportunities. Once you've found those opportunities for accelerated learning during your school day, build a bell schedule and a master schedule that allows for the needed collaboration time among teachers and time for students to receive that instruction outside of their core classes. This can happen in a lot of different ways. Some schools build in a common advisory period that happens 3, 4, or even 5 days a week. And all grade levels have that advisory at the same time, and therefore all are getting acceleration at the same time. Other schools designate an intervention extension period that rotates per grade level or per team. And this allows support staff to rotate through each group of students every day. Other schools find ways to leverage any extra time in their schedule, such as drop off or pickup times, maybe before or after school. Here's an example of a master schedule that has flexible grouping during morning drop off and a built-in advisory that varies by grade level and team. However you decide to find time for accelerated learning, make sure that your structure and schedules are set up for success. This means that they're clear, they're consistent so that students and teachers can build a routine, and they're easy for all to follow. In addition to staffing, organizing, and scheduling for next year, the next leadership move you'll want to consider is your culture and how you will lead a mindset shift for your staff. This begins with explicit communication about what acceleration is and what it is not. Think back to how we defined that using science terms just a few slides ago. Lots of great leaders to quote here. I can't stop reaching for Brene Brown's motto that clear is kind. It's one that we've been able to apply to so many different situations throughout the past year, and definitely applies to accelerated learning for all as we move forward. This is especially true for staff as adult professionals that want to feel successful and competent in their work. Otherwise, being clear is being kind and helping them reach that feeling of success and competency. As another very quotable leader, Zarita Hammond, says, clarity precedes competence. This is why it's so important when looking at how we lead a mindset shift to consider how you'll support it. For example, one way to build an accelerated learning for all mindset on your campus is to engage in studying this concept as a staff. First, select a book or article that will provide the why and a shared language for moving forward as a campus-wide team. Next, support the learning for your staff by developing clear, specific guidelines for the study, including how much time they'll have for their asynchronous study, a pay attention to or PAT list to help them process along the way, and hold them accountable for the learning by asking for a specific response. This deliverable could be a contribution to a shared workspace or a prepared response using a graphic organizer. Communicate the details of the plan. Be sure to include what you're studying, why, how it will work, and who all is involved. Then also include when and where the supporting group activities will take place. Let's look at an example plan. This campus decided to read Learning in the Fast Lane by Susie Pepper Rollins. You can see they'll distribute the books the last week of school for staff to read over the summer and have already scheduled when departments will share their reflections at staff meetings throughout the fall. They're supporting the independent study by providing a pay attention to list to guide reading and have asked for all staff to respond using a graphic organizer that's commonly used with students during instruction. The plan is clear to all when, how, and why they're reading Learning in the Fast Lane. Again, this is just another example of exactly how leaders can support a paradigm or mindset shift campus-wide. We've shared some ideas for staffing and scheduling, as well as leading a campus-wide mindset and commitment to accelerated learning for all. For more of the how for leaders, I'm going to ask Teri to share more systems about how to lead this change to benefit student learning next year. Teri?
Thanks, Amy. Yeah, that was awesome. I love that. And I'm going to continue by taking a closer look at the structures that will help lead that work getting done, especially when you're talking about collaboration and planning for instruction in your schools. First, thinking about when teachers are able to meet. We know collaboration makes us better, and discussing your standards with colleagues, teaching the same content, same grade level, or even vertical colleagues, if that's possible. All of that makes us better, and really engaging in that collaboration and that deep study of content will really help us better prepare to lead it with students. If you're the only one teaching the content, as is sometimes the case, you can engage with online resources or collaborate with instructional leaders, either on your campus or from different campuses through virtual meetings. We really transformed the possibilities this year with a lot of our experiences virtually. In addition to these structures for collaboration, components of accountability will help to build that sensibility of accelerated instruction for all into all of your planning routines. This includes shared forms of planning, like literally forms that you use that would have prompts and reminders about the components of accelerated learning for all and where those would need to work in. Using the forms, a system of study would also include specifics about who meets to collaborate, the frequency and timing of those meetings and that work, all detailed in the form and really set up for in a system, could be very beneficial. But a commitment to engage purposefully with resources also, all of this super important. And of course, it would be supported by a system of shared commitments that everyone's aware of and everyone engages in. But no matter what the structures are, active participation by leaders is going to be a game changer. It's foundational, it's critical to make all the difference in your culture and what actually ends up in practice. Let's look more specifically at an example of how a form can really support those protocols that you can lead to get accelerated instruction for all into practice. In this example, this is an example of unit planning. So a professional learning community that commits to unit planning with accelerated learning for all in mind would use a form like this to ensure that the most critical standards are identified through that study that was also systematized, and also that accelerating, which Amy noted before, involves pre-teaching, is aligned with the most critical standards, and it's scheduled to take place ahead of the beginning of the unit of instruction. This is something that makes sense absolutely when you're coming up with ideas and strategies for acceleration, but a system of using a form and calendaring and scheduling out those pieces of the work is critical to making sure it actually happens. It's the how. So keep in mind that it's the most critical content that would be amplified and supported through accelerated learning for all. So a process to ensure that the most strategic identification of those critical standards is foundational. Let's look at a system for collaboration that ensures just that. Looking ahead, teachers and leaders begin preparing to accelerate learning for all by recognizing that the content of a course, all of the content in a course that we're going to be asking students to master, it comes typically in a scope and sequence, and a system of curriculum is arranged into units. We have to study and select standards to accelerate our instructional plan. You would examine the course in its entirety, selecting those standards that are most essential within each unit for mastery of the course as a whole. So you can use an accelerated instruction approach to amplify that learning. And although it varies with your specific schedule and pacing and like all the elements that Amy laid out, either way, really focusing on an accelerated learning plan would mean centering around 8 to 10 standards for the course for the entire year. And often our first attempt at studying the standards in a course and selecting them can really yield even still too many, like the one modeled here. This example, there were still 13 essential standards after the first attempt at narrowing the focus. So what strategies could we use to narrow the focus even further and ensure we're making the right selections? definitely want to think about, once those most essential standards have been selected, the next step might be evaluating which of them is most aligned to readiness for the next grade level and that vertical alignment. Additionally, considering what is it from this course that would benefit the students most in college career readiness or military readiness, any of these things, and also, relevance in life. So when we're really trying to narrow that focus even further, these are all the things that can be considered beyond selecting critical content initially, but go even further to determine what content would be accelerated throughout the year. Using these steps will help you simplify the scope of your content so that you can create an effective calendar that can be used to plan for that accelerated learning for all. So this is a key part of the process. And depending on where you're at in the journey towards implementing accelerated learning for all, think about the structures and the guidance that you would need to provide to support this practice on your campus. We do know that these practices will need that support through some of the structures, but also they'll need to be monitored. Supporting and monitoring, especially systems that help school leaders with implementation, is the way to make sure that this work ultimately makes it into the learning environments and benefits the students. A system of pacing calendars, for example, is one way that leaders can support and monitor these practices. The example here is aligned with the district calendar. It integrates with an existing scope and sequence, but it can be adjusted to include the focus of acceleration, simply by adding in when accelerated learning will take place, ensuring that that's ahead of unit study, and so on, as we just described. But depending on where you accelerate in your campus, the pacing calendar would have to take that into account. But having time at the beginning of the year to draft this kind of calendar, maintain it, maintain the document, keep it alive, and dynamically adjust it as needed throughout the year, that can really be, again, another game changer and really move things forward as far as getting accelerated learning for all into practice. Also, looking forward at your systems, the systems that you use for support next year, how you would support this as a leader would include planning for and providing the professional learning necessary to practice these things, as well as the mind shift study that that Amy mentioned, but also professional learning on just exactly how to plan this way. And so that would need to be scheduled and planned for and put into place, as well as that clear communication that Amy mentioned to ensure that everyone's on the same page about why we're doing it and how we'll do it. As well, you'll want to think about ensuring implementation by monitoring practices. So you'll commit to and apply the new learning. Leaders could provide consistent cycles of observation and feedback aligned to the accelerated learning for all components, and also consistently analyzing data alongside with teachers to identify trends, continuously improve instruction and adjust it to meet the goals, and then also inform the responses, right, with students. Amy and I are so grateful that you joined us to learn together today. As our time comes to a close, please remember to find some time this summer to give yourself a break and recharge your batteries so you can lead into greatness next school year. But I do want to remind you that as we close our time here, to remember that nothing changes if nothing changes. As Amy said in the beginning today, these past 14 months have left us forever changed. But there's no returning to normal. We're really just going to take that learning, the lessons learned, the changes needed to meet the challenges of next year. They start with you as school leaders. If you change what you're doing, As a school leader, applying lessons learned, leading with purpose and intention, your students will have the best chance at success next year. And to learn even more about how to do this work, please join us for our next webinar. You can join us in part 2 as we go deeper into exactly how to implement this work and the planning and instructional strategies for accelerated learning for all. We'll uncover the why and the how of embedding accelerated learning into our practices and get this into practice in the classroom. We'll talk about how classroom teachers can implement instructional strategies that meet the needs of students according to their need and according to this accelerated mindset. The audience for part 2 will include classroom teachers, teacher leaders, principals, assistant principals, instructional coaches. Really, everyone can benefit from these ideas. I believe we're posting the registration link in the chat now. Please register, because even if you aren't able to join us, you will receive updates afterward and access to the recording. So you can still benefit from the information that we're sharing that day. So also you can share this link with others who you think should attend or should have access to that information as well. But we're excited and looking forward to that one on July 26th. Again, we thank you so much for joining us today. If you have any questions or if you want to learn more, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We provided our contact information here, our emails at our website, and don't forget to post to your social media and include us as a tag at E3 Alliance. And please, on behalf of Amy, Lori, and all the team here at E3 Alliance, please have a fantastic summer. And thank you for all you do.